Um, so I think a fair thing to say as we start the conversation about safety in the field would be that this work is never ever done alone. And I know I repeat myself, but I have to really be clear about this. At no point when we are in the field of work, whether we're in a shelter or whether we're near an encampment or at a park where we're hosting a VAX event, do we ever split ourselves from our teammate? Do we ever say, hey, I'm going to go check over here, you go check over there? No. We check together over here, we check together over there. It's important to understand that as a foundation for what we're going to talk about, because when outreach and engagement with folks in the field is done safely, it is not only productive, but it creates a balance of consistency that we stay close to. We are in a very special type of work where the circumstances that we will encounter are so wide in the scale of, what we will see, that it's absolutely necessary for us to preserve the integrity for our ability to come back. We know, sadly, that this population will always be out there. What we can't ensure is, are we going to be safe to go back? And even if it means we need to leave now, you can come back another day, or you can come back another week later. It's important for us to understand that. So I just start from the idea that safety is always centered around the idea that we need to work in teams. Let's talk about a few things. We need to talk about our community. We need to talk about the persons experiencing homelessness in the county of Los Angeles. Our approach to community engagement, obviously strategies, work in the field, safety in the field, and we are going to go through a few exercises where I will say this now. I will seek your thoughts, and I will remind folks there are no right answers or no wrong answers. These are just thoughts. We're basically flowing through observations and things from our gut. Before we came into this class, and I would argue that for maybe decades before this, the practice of street outreach was not a thing that had a lesson plan connected to it. The first folks that actually decided to go out and try to engage people on the streets did so out of intuition, did so out of just empathy, but did so without any foundation we could base any of this on. One might argue that there's therapeutic approaches that are applied in how people, let's say, provide therapy and talk to folks, but we are not therapists, and we are not saviors. We are simply bridges that connect people to resources they would not find. There's a population out there amongst the thousands of people who are experiencing homelessness in LA that will actively go to a drop-in center, that will actively go to a space to get a meal or to get a bed. They will take buses and trains to go to those spots. But the population that we're going to talk about today is a population that does not do those things. It's a population that is often out of sight, out of mind, but it's a population that seeks refuge and safety in their own communities that they've created there. This is the population that we're going to talk about. So just consider what I said. If the population we're going to serve does not go to services, how will they feel if services come to them? Some may welcome it. Some may open arms and say, what do you got? Let's talk. But some may feel a little bit repelled by that and say, no. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk. Let me start with lesson number 1. Anyone who tells you, no, I don't want to talk, or no, I'm not interested, and I'm saying that very politely, because it can be said many different ways, that's it. We do not try to convince them. We do not get into a debate. We are not trying to sell refrigerators or cars here, folks. We need to just be upfront and know that if a person gives you a signal, even if they didn't open their mouth, turn around and walk back. Even saying something like thank you or I understand, believe it or not, those are platforms that might irritate a person. Just think about the fact that, we need to respect a person's identity, a person's safety, and any number of conditions that may be experienced by any of the folks we're facing. And that rather than add chaos and become a further hindrance to their safety or their progress, let's come back another time. Folks will remember your face. Folks will remember that you wore a badge and that you were with DHS. And I'll be frank with you, because maybe this isn't in the PowerPoint. The population that experiences homelessness outside on the streets of the city of Los Angeles communicates incredibly well and very efficiently with each other. When something goes wrong at an encampment, word travels very, very quickly to other encampments. And suddenly, folks know who you are and what happened. And we've learned that the hard way. We've learned that through mistakes we've made where we've overcommitted or promised things that weren't deliverable out of just the hope that we could help folks, and basically completely destroyed our integrity or authenticity. So I just want to make sure folks understand the nature of that. Obviously, people experiencing homelessness are experts in their own lives, and it sounds weird saying this, they are our partners in the field. Yesterday you heard me compare or suggest that Jerry and I would both grab one end of the table and take it up the stairs. And what I mean by that is that I wouldn't expect Jerry to throw the whole burden on his back and me just sit there and watch, nor him to do the same to me. But that this is a combined work. You know, we don't save people. We are not out to provide salvation to folks. I would argue we are out to collaborate with folks. And that the actual act of getting a person safely indoors or convincing them to have a vaccine was a collaboration between you and the expert in the field. And we are not the experts in the field. The expert in the field is the person who's been outside unsheltered for 9 months, for 9 years. The person who's outside has seen and knows how to navigate spaces in a way that we're never ever going to learn in a matter of minutes or days. So I just want to start with the idea that we must definitely look at the individuals we are going to be working with, regardless of their condition, regardless of what you may see or assume right away because of their clothing or sometimes their behavior, that they are the ones who know how to navigate these waters outside constantly. Our outreach efforts must balance their goal and needs with our specific agenda. And what I say by that is that numerous times many of our community health workers, and I'm going to pick on them for a minute, go out obviously to promote and offer folks the vaccine in order to help folks maintain safety. But for many of the folks we meet, that's not the priority. I used the example yesterday. I lost my ID. I don't care about the vaccine. I need to get my ID again because without it, I cannot get into a motel. I cannot get my benefits. I cannot get things that I need. So consider that in these spaces where we find folks telling us what their priority is, we must allow for them to articulate that clearly to us, and we must listen. Again, I'll say it 20 times, 75% listening, 25% talking. We approach the work to connect the community with respect for their autonomy while offering information and options to get vaccinations and other services. Our goal is to empower through education, and everyone on our team are experts in their own right. Let me pause for a minute because I want to go to the first phrase, because the first thing I want to be clear with is how much do we know about the vaccine? Do we know what it does to folks? Do we know what the difference between Pfizer and Moderna is? And I say this because you may not necessarily be steeped in that or be absolutely aware or knowledgeable of that, but you will do yourself a huge disservice if you don't make an effort to listen in those learning collaboratives or at least ask questions to your clinical peers to make sure you understand why some things work and what doesn't work. When we share information about the vaccine with people, assuming that is that we know the material that we're covering, do we know what folks are going to tell us as to why they don't want the vaccine? And I think that's central too, because if we started to understand the fears, the anxieties, the, let's say, rumors, or the truths that exist around why people are scared of the vaccine, we might better inform ourselves in a way to be able to defend the integrity of what we're offering in a way that's meaningful. I'll share a very quick one with you all that we've heard many different reasons why folks don't want the vaccine. And obviously you're familiar with some of them. You're putting a microchip in me. You guys are trying to sterilize me. Any number of things. As we hear these things, we need to collect these things in our mind because we need to inform Cyril, Gabe, Aaron, myself, and all the education team of these things so that we can tell everyone that we work with what we're hearing. What are folks understanding about why they don't want to take the vaccine? We learned last week that someone was told, I don't want the vaccine because it's making people's hair fall out. And we had never heard that one before. And it was fascinating. But a theory had spread in a particular encampment that if you get vaccinated, your hair will slowly start to fall off your face, your head, and all parts of your body. Again, we don't ridicule folks, we don't laugh or mock them, but we basically try to say, and without sounding, condescending or without trying to mock people, I understand what you're saying. That doesn't mean I agree, that doesn't mean you're right, but we have to understand that folks, especially the population we work with, it's sad to say, is often the last to receive updated information. They're always the last in line for everything. I'll remind folks, like I did yesterday, I would safely bet that most of us got our COVID checks last year. Some of them, many of them still haven't, because they lack a mailing address or because they lack an ID. So just consider that when we work outside. Peer specialists, CHWs, peer ambassadors embedded in our team often have lived experience and are trained to support those who struggle with mental health, psychological trauma, substance use. Their personal experiences with similar challenges provide peer support specialists with expertise that professional training cannot replicate. And what I'm saying by that is, again, I'll use myself as the ultimate example of this. I started this career many years ago going out with a nun and a retired aircraft engineer. And that's who was with me. A person who basically had worked in aviation industry for 40 years and a nun who was married to Jesus. And the three of us basically would go in a van with peanut butter jelly sandwiches and water, trying to build trust, eye contact, trying to have laughter with people, so that we might convince them to get into the van with me to go to a shelter. And I often think of the idea that when family would see me in Thanksgiving and would say, "Rudy, what do you do for a living?" I would say, "I drive around with two strangers and try to abduct people." Because it's true. That's what I used to do. But we don't do that anymore. We are now, I hate to say this, but we're now in a state of services that's so advanced and so modern that if you are not familiar with this, there are outreach teams funded by the Department of Health Services through a program called E6. There are teams of outreach workers that are made up of not just a peer specialist who he or she used to be homeless at one point, but a substance abuse specialist who knows how to talk about addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs, and knows how to navigate through detox and any other type of treatment, and a person with clinical background that can speak to a person and sometimes even evaluate that person's illness to figure out, does this person need psychiatric medication? Is this a person who needs a psych eval? Is this a person who needs a 5150? Does anyone near here know what a 5150 is? Please.
Is that voluntary or involuntary?
Involuntary.
Involuntary, what's the word? Committed into psychiatric care.
If a person is a threat to self or a threat to others, they can and should be placed on a 5150, which is basically 5150. 5150 is a psychiatric hold for up to 72 hours in an emergency room so that that person can receive psychiatric supervision and determine, can this person continue to function with medication, or should this person now receive a higher level of psychiatric care, right? And again, this is not uncommon in the work we do. I think it happens at such a frequent rate that you'll find that in the teams that you will be working with, there will be people who know exactly how to navigate that. They'll know how to talk to an emergency, to an EMT, to an ambulance, and ensure that the person gets the right level of psychiatric care, okay? We start from a place of respect. Obviously, we meet the person where they're at. We stay sensitive to the balance of power between us and the other person. And what do I mean by that? Are you talking more than the other person? Maybe, maybe not. I want to ask Jerry. Jerry, how does it feel to me? How does it feel for you to talk to me right here? We're good, right?
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel if I was talking to you like this?
Yeah.
And like this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a little intimidating. You know who does this? Law enforcement does this. People with a baton who want to give you a ticket for sleeping on a sidewalk do this, right? In the old days, there was an ability for us with social distancing to be able to hold a spot where we would give the person the higher ground. Not in a condescending way, but in a genuine way that provided us safety and provided us an ability to move away if we needed to. But I want to be clear that these things may seem very small, but they are incredibly powerful. And you may not notice it, but it will change the mood and the way a person will want to talk to you. The other thing, and I don't know that it's listed here, but I want to be very clear, is I want you in 2 minutes to tell me about your mornings. What did you do when you got up?
Woke up.
Speak up.
I woke up, took a shower, got out the shower, started making some breakfast.
Yeah, go on.
Started making some breakfast, made some coffee.
Oh, dude, look at this.
Yeah, and I just started.
I'm gonna pause my friend here for a minute. How do any of you feel? Has someone done that to you? How does that feel? It is absolutely disheartening. Jerry is telling me an account of what his day was because I asked him, and I don't have the decency to not only not make eye contact with him, but completely block out. And I know it sounds so simple, but it is constantly around us. It lives with us. We all carry a device in our pocket that has a computer that's greater than the computer that sent Apollo missions to the moon. How does that sound? Right? And I know it sounds odd saying this, but does anyone here in this class have an iWatch right now? Wearing an iWatch? If not, let me just share this with the class. There was a class a couple classes ago where somebody in the class that I was talking to, or that was in our class, had or was wearing an iWatch. And I didn't know what was wrong, but this person kept going like this to the iWatch. And I didn't realize that when it sends you a message or when someone texts you, it'll vibrate on your wrist. And the way to stop it from vibrating is by just tapping it. Because I didn't know what that was. And by the way, I'm from the 70s, so I don't know anything about computers. I thought there were mosquitoes around this person. Like, I was convinced that I needed to go during break to buy spray because this person kept going like this to themselves, right? Also, side note, there was a person 3 classes ago who had 2 iWatches.
Oh,
I don't know why. But maybe this person was on New York time and LA time. I don't know. Those things are distracting. Those things are distracting. And we lose ourselves. And I'll tell you something. I might look like I'm listening to Jerry, but I'm not. I'm distracted because a friend is sending me a funny photo or because the baseball strike is over. However, if I ask Jerry, did you have breakfast? Jerry said, I had breakfast. It would be fair for Jerry to say, I told you, I had breakfast. So think about that feeling one gets when they ask you a question and you had already said that. And let me be very careful. Forget the iPhone. Are you lost in thought? Did you have that crappy morning where Bobby got a ticket and got a speeding ticket and accidentally locked himself out of the car when he went to go buy the paper? Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be distraction of an electrical device. It might be the distraction of your thoughts. It might be the anxiety you may have because the weather's getting worse. And I want to pick on you, Roman. And you're wearing sponges for shoes that are basically going to collect water. And you now have to cross the Mississippi River.
And I forgot my cigarettes.
Exactly. Even worse. So,
That sucks, man.
so let me just be clear. It sounds incredibly simplistic, but it's absolutely important for us to understand how much it will affect our ability to engage folks in the field. Let me remind folks that my computer has a tendency to kick me off if I don't touch it every 2 minutes. So let me get this back on. It was an onboarding and orientation. New hire. There we go. So you know what the new one my computer is doing, Cyril?
What's that?
The mouse is stopping. The mouse
Really?
doesn't want to work.
Oh, you have to do it
I
manually?
have to do it manually. That is absolutely nuts. I hear you.
Oh.
Any questions so far on any of the stuff I'm touching with you all?
Are they going to just automatically see us as being in a position of authority?
They can if you see your badge.
Okay.
They can if you see you in numbers.
Because
They can if they see you with, let's say, a tent and a logo somewhere. But let me be very careful. You ask a brilliant question, Roman. We must undo that as quickly as possible. We must associate ourselves with medicine and health. We must use words like health services, right? Department is a scary word because department is police department. County is a scarier word because you know what county is? County jail. But you know what health is? Health is not sneezing. And you know what services is? I'm here to serve you. I'm here to provide services for you. I've learned the hard way that you want to say we're with health services.
Okay.
Remove the word department and county. I know it sounds like I'm lying, but I need to ask you all to give yourselves as much advantage walking into a situation. Because to Roman's point, Roman's asking the question because think of everything we talked about yesterday. Think about the increased policing that's happening. Think of that sign I showed you yesterday that now says that if you happen to be in this area, you can be ticketed or even arrested. And then just think about the idea that you all have your belongings stored simply or safely where you go to sleep tonight. You have at least the ability to know that there's a locker, or there's a cabinet, or there's a closet, or that whatever. You know that the things that belong to you will be there when you get back. A life on the streets does not guarantee any of that. A life on the streets means that in the process of you going to pick up coffee or going around the corner to see if you could get a cigarette, you came back and everything you own is gone. Everything that you've collected that means something to you has disappeared. And not because a police officer took it away with a sanitation team. Somebody robbed you. Somebody didn't want you there, and an angry neighbor came out and just threw everything in the trash. This is the life outside, and I don't mean to exaggerate or make it more than it should be, but it's important for us to understand that there is nothing ordinary about what we are going to be seeing in the field. Let me find, it's a new higher orientation agenda. There we go. Come on, computer.
Real quick, can I step outside and make a phone call?
Take your time. And don't go out there and go over. Pick an office, my friend. Let me pull this up. Sorry, guys. It's taking
The first office right there is yours.
Yeah. Cyril,
Yeah.
you've seen efforts, you've seen VAX efforts in shelters
Yeah.
and on the streets.
Yeah.
What would you say the difference is between both types of efforts? Have you noticed the difference between when we do a VAX event at a shelter and we do a VAX event on the streets?
Well, there's a lot of differences. I guess, the shelter, you're coming into these shelters, and even if you don't see the administrators, you can feel the administrators. There's certain policies, there's certain things.
There's control.
There's control. They exert control, and they, so there's a complexity to that, I guess, that can work to our advantage or against us. And that control, yeah. And in the other setting, there is there is no control. There is no. Well, you run into other things too sometimes. One day, there was a councilman doing a sweep, basically. I mean, it wasn't a sweep, but something similar to that. So there's things like that. And you have to, of course, it's very different to go into people's camps and tents and trailers and call them and advertise your services, whereas in the shelters, the people that are willing to come, they basically come. And I think we do outreach too, trying to reach more, but I'm not sure how many more we're getting than the ones that, because that's announced to people and they come out.
Cyril is bringing up a very important point, which has to do around the idea of control and no control. In that, in no control, how is it going to happen if, let's just say, Roman, I'll pick on you. You're having a conversation with me because I've been homeless, I'm in a tent, and I actually said, sure, who are you? What are you up to? I've offered you a bridge to communicate with me.
Right.
However, Rose is waving her arms in the air and yelling at birds on the tree. Yesenia is about to get in a fight with Jerry, and looks like they're talking to each other bad, and it's slowly starting to simmer, like it's starting to get hotter. And you can see Yesenia, sorry. Dude, I'm so tired, guys. I need to drink more coffee. I called you Yesenia because I'm losing my mind. I'm now thinking of old colleagues. There's going to be a fight,
Okay.
right? And then while this is happening, Bobby is basically singing the Star Spangled Banner over
Oh.
and over and over and
I was like,
over.
who's fighting?
Like when it ends, start singing it again, right?
Okay.
Can you remain focused on me?
That's a good question, huh?
That
Because
is
it's not, they're outside, right?
Or
So
we're
I'm
outside.
Not gonna ask them to step away from their tent or anything, right?
Well, I've said sure. And I've actually opened a door to say, what do you got?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, if you can maybe like let's go somewhere that's a little bit quieter.
See, there's a negotiation piece that Roman is bringing up, which is absolutely brilliant. I did not approach Roman in an intimidating way or say, what the fuck do you want?
Right.
I actually said, sure.
Yeah.
What do you need? And because maybe I approached that conversation with, a level of, let's say, authenticity, let me start with number one. Roman must identify himself right away and say, I'm Roman.
Okay.
I'm with the health services, and I'd love to talk to you about why we're here today.
Right.
So let's just start with that, because until Roman says that, I don't know who Roman is.
Right.
A narc? A cop? An angry neighbor? I don't know, right? Second thing is, if I've accepted that, and I've said, okay, and what are you guys doing here today? That's where Roman might have the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Is it okay if we try to, walk over here just for a little bit and you can come right back? And think about why this is an incredibly strong question. In engagement and in strategy, you're asking the person to leave their home. If I walked up to your door and I rang on the doorbell and you actually said, I want to talk to you, what if I said, let's talk in the corner. Let's walk away from your front porch and walk down to the stop sign on the corner. That's the equivalent of this. And it sounds weird, but hear me. The tent isn't just the home. The space around the tent is the home. When you're standing right on the edge of that zipper and you're talking to folks, you might as well be stepping in the doorway of their living room. And I know what I'm saying sounds incredibly ridiculous, but I really, really mean it. Home, as a person interprets it, can be any number of things. It doesn't even have to be a tent. It can be a box. It can be a sleeping bag, right? I've found that it took me years to realize that my colleague, Armando, knew and had the brilliance to say, is it okay for me to be right here? And I used to always think, why is he asking the person that? It's fine for him to be right there. He's on a sidewalk. It's a public walkway. He's standing right in front of the person's tent. He might be stepping on a space that person doesn't want him to step on, right? To Roman's point, getting the person to walk away, to have the conversation, might allow Roman to be more focused and more aware of what's happening. That person may say, no, I don't want my stuff stolen. I need to stay right here. And let's remember something. Roman is not alone. Roman is there with Cyril. And here we're going to do a thing where Roman may start the conversation, and if Cyril has also introduced themselves, maybe through two of them, there can be a give and take that allows for dialogue to happen with this person. But let me be also clear. In most situations where we do outreach, conversation is limited to one person. When we start talking about Cyril and Roman talking to me, at what point does that start to feel like an interrogation? At what point does that feel like you might as well put the light over my head and ask me, where were you at 9 o'clock last night, right? If one person is engaged, if Roman is engaged in the conversation with me, it would be very helpful for Cyril to basically not even look at the conversation, but stay there and just look around. And why is Cyril looking around? Because what if someone's trying to grab something from Roman's bag? What if Roman's backpack appears to have something hanging out that the person wants? Cyril, we never make contact initiate any physical contact with folks, but Cyril would see someone's coming and say, Roman, let's walk over this way. Let's move over together. Roman won't know. Roman is here.
Yeah.
But Roman doesn't know what's happening behind. Cyril does, because Cyril's looking around.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, heavy one. Let me do a polite one. Person 2 comes up and goes, oh, I want to talk to Roman. But Roman's involved in a conversation with me. Cyril can say, yeah, Roman will help. I can help a little too, but, you know, the minute Roman's done, he'll be able to talk to you and you guys can talk. So just hear all these weird things I'm talking about, how incredibly complex the dynamics become. And forget people yelling at trees or having a fight, right? We had a drive-by. I mean, we had a car basically drive by the street and just shoot a gun in the air to scare people. Think about traffic. Think about all the things around us that will suddenly compel us to not just seek safety, but to make sure that the person we're with is also safe. To make sure that I'm not going to hide under a car. Hey, come with me, let's get down. Or you know what, we're next to the van, let's get behind it, let's get down together, right? Again, all these things are about seeing, understanding, and looking around us. I'll say one last thing about the example I'm sharing right now. It happens very quickly. It unfolds fast. This is not a slow burn that we're talking about 8 or 12 minutes. Sometimes things can go sideways very, very quickly. And when they do you and your colleague have a strategy? Have you and the person that you're working with said, hey, if something goes bad here, let's agree that we need to go get sandwiches and that we move back to the car, or that we have some way of moving. Cyril's point, in a shelter, for those of us that will go into sheltered settings, there is staff there. There are folks who we would assume and hope are watching, are vigilant, and provide a sense of framework so that people feel like you can navigate through it. But on the streets, we rely on each other. We do not have security guards that go with us. We are not accompanied by unarmed detectives. We are us going out. And we are intuitive, we are strong, and we're teammates. We never ever present ourselves as two people disagreeing. Our approach, let me be very careful here, because it says whatever it takes, continue offering support to get clients housed and improve their health. Valuing peer voices, recognizing that personal experiences provide peer support specialists with expertise that professional training cannot replicate. Harm reduction. Actions that aim to minimize negative health, social, and legal impacts of substance use and other potentially harmful practices. Cultural humility, which we'll get to this afternoon, which is the idea that we are aware, and I'm going to say it frankly, everyone in this room has their own bias. Everyone in this room has something that exists in them that they don't feel safe or that is different from what they know. And that is not a criticism to you all. We are human beings. We are inherently flawed at times, but we are all beautiful and special. And I say that because this is the type of job, believe it or not, that will require you to put that on a shelf. You can come back to it when we're going home, but when we're there in the present in the field, I need you to just know what's coming out of your mouth and whether or not you might be offending folks by naming someone by a name or pejorative thing that can hurt people. In trauma-informed care, we understand that we will come with our own experiences of trauma, and that the effects of our trauma impact how we communicate our outlook and our trust in those around us. This is a lot to take in, but let me just start with one, that whatever it takes, when I think of that, we are out for the vaccine, folks. We are out to promote the vaccine. We are out to help people get healthier by taking the vaccine. But a person who needs their ID, a person who hasn't seen their case manager in 6 months and thinks that they have a Section 8 and they're about to lose it, may not see the same priority we see. Does that mean that we say, oh, no, that's not what we do. We're just here for the vaccine? No. There are people amongst us that might know how to navigate systems. There are people around us who are literally walking maps that might be able to meet the individual and say, hey, you know what? Roman, I don't have the answer for that, but my colleague Cyril might. Would you be okay with me checking in with Cyril to see if Cyril might find out who your case manager is? You see, that's responsible. Here's what irresponsible is. Hey, Cyril, get over here. Roman had a case manager and hasn't seen it in like 6 months. You want to look that up? No. And the thing is, we're all different. There's a version of me that's without coffee, and there's a version of me that exists with coffee. Be the version without coffee. Think and talk to others before you start engaging. I will say this, and I will say this till I'm done with this profession and I'm sitting somewhere on a hammock drinking beer out of a coconut, that the peer level voices on my team have improved my ability to do this profession hundreds and hundreds of times over and over again. I work with colleagues who have degrees in social work. I work with colleagues that have been founders of great institutions of service within the county of Los Angeles. But none of those folks equals what a person who had been on the streets themselves has in their authenticity and in their kindness and in their ability to relate to folks in a way that no textbook, no education will ever provide for you. So just recognize how significant this is. We use tools for engagement. Motivational interviewing is a guiding style of discussion that blends listening with conversational direction, using open-ended questions to help draw out more meaning. This may include sharing personal perspectives and experiences to invite more discussion. I'll pick on Jerry again. There's a difference between me asking Jerry, "Hey Jerry, are you having a good morning?" When I say, "Hey Jerry, are you having a good morning?" Jerry can say, "Yes, I am." "No, I'm not." But if I say, "Hey Jerry, tell me about your morning," Jerry will go into detail. I got up, took a shower, had breakfast, noticed it was raining, looked for my boots, tried to see if I had an umbrella, stole it from my father, whatever. But in doing so, Jerry has given me all these things that help inform me more about Jerry's thought, feeling, how Jerry is. Think about how important that is over 3 letters. Yes. No. We want to ask open-ended questions. And the danger there is if we're not gauging how the individual is receiving it, you start going into that mode of interrogation where you might as well be a cop. But without that, we're basically relying on guessing. So I want to just be clear on that. Active listening and reflective listening, attentively listening while someone speaks, then paraphrasing and reflecting what is said to confirm the message, is understood while withholding judgment and advice. In that one, I'm sure people have walked up to you at events and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Because let me invite Cyril briefly, besides being an educator on this class, let me invite him to explain what one of his areas of specialty is that you bring to this work, that you do. Do you want to share that with folks?
Sure.
Please.
Well, I was an artist before, and I still am, I guess, in some ways. But I do art outreach at the vaccination events. I did it now a few times, where besides the vaccination setup, there's also a table with art materials. And I try to keep it very kind of negotiation-free. You know, all the things that applies to the vaccination, there's often incentives like gift cards or a tent or, you know, which makes it just a negotiation. I just provide this service of most for people who wait, for example. Like I say when they're waiting, instead of waiting, do you want to draw? I have some coloring books, or you can, you know. And so what happens ideally then? What happened a few times is that they sit down, and instead of having a very short interaction, actually spend time. I had some people sit down for 2 hours or half an hour, and then sometimes not talk for a long time, but eventually most of them have a very relaxed conversation, a conversation that's not an interrogation, but a conversation where you just talk. And it's very, I feel like ideally they don't see me as someone who's really like, who the agenda is kind of unclear, and that relaxes the whole thing. If it works. It doesn't work with everyone, but it works with more people than I thought. It's really great for kids because, you know, when kids come and do that, their parents really like it, and then the parents are happy, and, you know, so.
And you've seen that it relaxes folks? You've seen that it gives folks a place where they don't feel stressed?
One guy at Skid Row literally said there was this event 2 weeks ago. It was crazy, you know, there was so many people, so different organizations. It was an event for General Jeff, who was a big figure in the community. There were a lot of people. And one guy, he sat down, he didn't even draw, but he just sat down and he looked what I did. And he said, wow, this is so great. You know, I can just sit here, I can take my mind off this, you know, all my stuff that I have to do, my things. And he eventually, in a very eloquent manner, told me how, you know, it's getting to be Christmas and he doesn't want to talk to his family because he's ashamed, because he relapsed and he's on the street. And he gave me a very sincere account of his momentary state, and yeah, it was very impressive, you know. And it wasn't like I didn't do that much at all. I just sat there and I had some stuff and provided him with a space to kind of be, you know.
The reason I asked Cyril to share this, and I think I want to just be clear when describing this, is that in a way, it sounds like I'm going to put pressure on you, but if you follow these guidelines, and if you see what Cyril is bringing, restoring dignity to an individual is the most absolute connection we can start with from our place, regardless of whether we're just testing folks or driving materials or even doing that outreach out there. Then think about, again, if you're not sleeping in a shelter and your life is in a tent or in a sleeping bag outside, when do you draw? Why would you draw? Where would you be able to sit down at a chair under a tent if it's sunny and know that for the next hour you have acrylics and canvas and the freedom of not having to look over your shoulder to see if someone's coming to mug you or know that your stuff is being taken away from you? And I know that sounds incredibly peculiar, but it's so lacking in every approach we've had that I must commend Cyril and his gifts for providing a sense of normalcy, if you will, in a life that's full of chaos. Cyril, I can't compare it to this, but I've been at events where people will bring shoes, people will bring water. And at one of these events, a group of folks who was working in Hollywood, who owned a shop that did pedicures and manicures, brought their chairs and all of their equipment and basically were providing manicures and pedicures to people on the streets. And we thought they were just going to be there for 45 minutes. They were there for 8 hours and they never stopped working. And a person that I had been working with who was been on the streets, who she had allowed for me to kind of just know her, at one point looked at me and said that she never thought she would ever have one of these again. That she could remember a moment in her life where she would pay for it and she would get it, but she was convinced after her life on the street started that this was a luxury she would never be afforded again in her life. And it sounds odd, but it's normal. I mean, I often think of the pandemic, and it sounds weird me asking you all this, but are there things you haven't seen in the pandemic? Are there things the pandemic took away from you? Are there things that you used to go to that the pandemic stripped you of because a place was closed or suddenly you couldn't go to these things? And I've asked this before. There was a person in the class who loved going to clubs to dance on Friday nights and Saturday nights to just let out all the energy and be with friends, and that he couldn't go anymore. It felt weird because it was a piece of his life. But I don't know. You don't have to answer this, but just think about where gaps are created, and they might be filled by the simple act of introducing someone with something absolutely necessary. I would argue that Cyril brings a vital and essential piece of dignity back to lives that don't have this. Working in the field, we practice good judgment, intuition, street sense, cultural competency. We remember that we are entering people's homes and community. We are aware of the environment. We put ourselves out of harm's way. And what I mean by ourselves is not just you and your colleague, but even the person that you're working with, that you are speaking with, has to be out of harm's way. Obviously, going with a partner, be aware of needles. Why is it here? It's happened, folks. We don't wear open-toe shoes. I may even argue that if you have a good pair of leather boots, go with that, because we will be going into places where unfortunately there is a propensity of needles scattered through the floor that we need to be aware of. We use gloves if there's something that we're going to grab or pick up, and there's no reason why we wouldn't have gloves. Our friend Louis has given us some, and we will always have them with us. We keep our director informed of any unusual situations. Cyril and Roman have noticed that when talking to me, I went to scratch my back, and when I picked up my sweater, they saw a gun in my belt. Cyril saw it, Roman saw it. Without making chaos and running, we might want to say, hey, let's go get sandwiches. We're going to go get some sandwiches. And we don't just go hide in a car and pray that this person doesn't shoot us, but we tell our director, so our director can inform other people to carefully remove themselves from the situation so that we can continue to do our work. So informing your director of anything that's off, of anything that feels like it's not normal or natural, is absolutely necessary for us to maintain the integrity of our role, but also stay safe to come back another day. Please.
So is it not normal that people have CCWs here?
CCWs,
Concealed carry permits?
not at all.
No.
Not in
You're now in a
California.
state that is completely the opposite, my friend, of your state.
Yeah.
I feel for you.
I'm
I feel for you, Bobby, because your world. Let me just tell Cyril this.
Yeah, what's that?
Bobby is from the great state of Georgia.
Okay.
I love Georgia, by the way.
Yeah.
I have family that live there. But the truth is that I'll tell the story that my friend, he's French, Remy. Remy and his son love hunting boar.
Oh yeah.
They have shotguns, and they go to a friend's farm in Texas because this friend has boar problems, where the boars are now killing off other livestock
Mm-hmm.
and are just running wild. So for 1 week, Remy and his son go out to this farm, and they're allowed to hunt boar like crazy. They hunt so much boar that they actually hire a company to make sausage. Like an actual company shows up with a machine
Mm-hmm.
and just converts all this boar that they shoot into sausages. So whenever Remy comes back from Texas, there's sausage for a whole city, right? But the reason I tell you about Remy and his son is because when Remy and his son are going to the airport to check in and they're carrying the boxes with their shotguns and ammunition, they have to go to the gate with all their passes and all their credentials so that it's understood that this is hunting material. So those materials can be placed under the plane
Mm-hmm.
and be taken over there. When Remy and his son are standing in line with the boxes, they tell me the story. This is funny. And they're in LAX at the airport here in LA. People are constantly saying, "Hey, what instrument do you play? What instrument is that? Is that a cello? Is that a violin? What is that?" But then they tell me the opposite story. That when they're flying out of Dallas, Fort Worth, and they have the boxes with them, people walk up to them and go, "Is that a shotgun? What kind is it?" "Oh, that's interesting. It's not a rifle. What type do you use?" "I use a blah, blah, blah." So I thought of how funny the difference is that Texans know right away that that's a rifle or a gun, but Angelinos think you're playing the cello, think that you're playing a
Yeah.
violin.
Same thing for me.
I love both, but I just think it's a funny story.
Yeah, no, if you see concealed weapons down here, it's, I'm gonna guess 90% of the time, gang members.
Mhm.
Really, that's about, right?
Yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah, yeah. And people, like, they'll try to gangbang on you, they'll flash them at you. And,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
you know, like, they,
I'm actually trying to go apply for mine. I heard it's possible to get them.
It- Yeah, you're in a.
I think you have to have, like, a really good reason. You have to, like, really convince them that you need more communism down here. Like, it's pretty.
For
like,
what?
I'm from Pennsylvania.
Concealed weapon.
Like, I know how. And there's probably a
Carry
severe
CCW, carry concealed
limitation of
weapon.
what you're actually allowed to,
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like a
to have. You know?
Yeah, no, Georgia, you literally, once you get your CCW, you can go in there and buy anything you want, as many as you
Yeah.
want, whatever you want. There's no.
So let me add to this question or this weird section that is this training has suddenly gone into.
Sorry.
No, it's not a bad one. It's not a bad one. I use the example because it may not be something as poignant or as obvious as a gun,
Mhm.
right? I went. You guys mind if I share a story with you?
Okay.
I went with a group of colleagues that were all outreach workers. There were 4 of us to an encampment circle that was right by the 110 freeway, just west of downtown LA. And there were 12 tents, all in a circle. And the reason we went to this encampment was because we were told that one of the people in the tent was in her last trimester of the pregnancy, and that she had not received any prenatal care. And that we had a connection to a nurse who came with us that day to see if we could convince her to have a full physical done, because we were worried about her health and the health of her baby. But we were told that that was where the encampment is, where the lady is. And we went in the middle of the day, sunshine, and the 4 of us went out, and we started calling folks, and no one was coming out of the tents, because we quickly realized no one was there. And at the risk of sounding naive or stupid, because this is what we did at the time, we took our business cards and we basically just left them close to the front of the tent, just saying, hey, we have food, we have medicine, contact us, we can bring it to you, right? But because we quickly had to scramble to get these business cards, it took us a minute or 2 to make sure we had enough, and some folks were writing stuff on the back of it. This encampment that I'm telling you was secluded. You had to go down a long, long alley, because it was the only way in and the only way out to get to this weird cul-de-sac where these tents were. Without any notice and without any warning, 5 guys came in. And these 5 guys were big. They were all bald. And they were covered in like neck tattoos and arm tattoos. And they were wearing like these cheap liquor store sunglasses that looked like they cost $1. And I'm gonna be frank with you. Let's talk about cultural humility. They were gang members. Like, we noticed that they were wearing white tank tops, and that some of them had even like a, I don't know, like a flannel shirt buttoned open. And when they walked in to the encampment, they didn't ask us who we were or anything, but they started going to the tents, and they started unzipping the tents and looking in the tents. And my staff and myself, we got really scared because we didn't know what to do. Like, how do we get out without asking who they are, what they are? But it wasn't until we noticed that when one of them was leaning over, that he was wearing a little chain, and there was an LAPD badge hanging from his neck. And that the other one had a strap under it and had his weapon and also had an LAPD badge hanging. And what we thought was gang members was actually narcotics unit detectives who were trying to serve a warrant or find someone responsible for something. We learned that after the fact.
Right.
But we didn't ask. And when one of my colleagues said, hi, I'm from like PATH, and we're out here to, he said, took his glasses, like, get the fuck out. And like didn't argue, like didn't want to know who we were or what we wanted. Obviously, we were all wearing uniforms that said who we were. We got out. We didn't run out. We made our way out and left. But we did not know what could happen. We never opened a tent. We never, not just in that incident, but we never opened a tent. We never asked somebody to get in our car with us. We never accept the invitation from someone and say, hey, you want to come in and sit with me? Even if the tent has a couch. And believe me, I've seen tents with couches. I've seen a tent with a jacuzzi. Don't ask me how. I'll tell you that story someday. But I tell you this because we don't. We stay in a space where it's safe. But it wasn't until my colleague Stephanie said, what if somebody was in that tent? And what if that person knew that the cops were coming and that person was armed? We don't know that. But that could have been a scenario. So I say this all to you because, again, I love my city, but my God, my city's nuts.
Yeah.
It is really, really nuts, Bobby. Don't be scared.
Nah, it doesn't bother me.
I love it. Let me get back. The computer is doing the thing again. We're going to take a break in about